What is up, college sports fans, Big 12 fans, fellow members of Mountaineer Nation? Welcome in to another live edition of Couz's Corner here, what I like to call Couz's Corner Happy Hour, as we are live here to talk about conference realignment. What I want to talk about in this show tonight is the Pac-12. Exactly why did the Pac-12 collapse? What were the chain of events that happened to cause it to collapse? Which, we all know it was related to mismanagement, poor decision making, some hubris, elitism, whatever you want to call it. But what were the actual chain of events? There was an article in the LA Times that was written, I think, today that I'm going to talk about, give you my thoughts on it. Also, what is next for the Pac-4, the four teams that are left in Stanford, Washington State, Oregon State, and Cal? What do those four teams do? Do they merge? Do they add teams? What happens? Do they break off on their own and do different things? We're going to talk about all that tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. There was a Los Angeles Times article today. It went down the timeline of what happened and why the Pac-12 broke apart. Number one, goes back to Larry Scott days. Larry Scott made some bad decisions. He promised the league all this money from the Pac-12 network. It never materialized. They never got all that money. When Larry Scott leaves, in comes George Kliavkoff. Well, the next occurrence is Texas and Oklahoma announced they're leaving the Big 12 for the SEC. At that point in time, Bob Bowlesby, the Big 12 commissioner at the time, goes to George Kliavkoff and says, "Hey, our remaining 8 members want to merge with you and form the Pac-20. Go to a Power 4 conference system." So George Kliavkoff takes that back to his presidents. They put together a working group of 6 different presidents and ADs. They talk about it. They put together a slideshow presentation. Folt, I can't remember her first name off the top of my head, but the president of USC was on that committee. Well, they went to do a presentation for the group. They said she gets into about the third slide of the presentation, and she basically says, "Why are we even talking about this? Why would we expand? We don't need to do this." So at that point, nobody bucked her. Not one person in that room stood up and said, "Hey, we need to do this. This is the right thing." They let one school, at USC, make that decision. Well, what happened less than 1 year later? USC goes and UCLA leave and announce they're leaving to go to the Big Ten. Well, at that point, George Kliavkoff goes to the Board of Regents for the University of California system, which includes both Cal and UCLA. He got with a small group of the Board of Regents and says, "Hey," and they made a deal and they said, "Look, we're going to run some numbers. Based on what these numbers are, if you can guarantee UCLA X number of dollars by staying in the PAC, then we will vote to keep them in." Well, they ran the numbers. They estimated they would make $62 million in the Big Ten. They estimated $10 million in travel costs. So they told George Kliavkoff, "If you can guarantee UCLA $52 million from this next Pac-12 media deal, then we will vote to keep UCLA in the league." Well, he takes that back to the presidents. Of course, what's that mean? The league's not going to get a $52 million per team TV deal. It's not going to happen. So in order for that to work, the rest of the teams in the conference would have to take a cut of the media revenue in order to give UCLA a greater share. Well, Oregon right off the bat said, "No, we're not agreeing to that. No way will we agree to take less money than UCLA." And to be frank, I don't blame them. I wouldn't have either. So that killed that deal. So UCLA ends up leaving with USC. Now comes the TV deal. They asked one university president, and the article didn't say who, but one university president decided to work with a professor at their school to figure out how much the Pac-12 was worth. ESPN had offered them $30 million to renew their TV deal. It was ESPN and Fox had offered them $30 million to renew their deal. This one president got with the professor. They decided, "Nah, our league's worth $50 million. So they went back and counter-offered to ESPN and said, no, we want $50 million. Basically pissed ESPN off, and ESPN walked. There goes the deal. Big 12 jumps in line. They get their deal for $37.1 million. We all know how that turned out. Well, in the meantime, the PAC's still working on trying to get a deal. Months go by, right? All of a sudden, we start hearing the rumblings of the Four Corner schools. We start hearing about Colorado getting antsy. There are two deals that Cliff Koff was able to get. One was a linear deal with several networks, ESPN, I think Fox was involved, CBS, NBC. There were several different networks involved, and Amazon, right? I never did hear what the amount was, but there was a lot of linear involved in it. And then there was also the Apple deal that we heard got presented for $23 million plus incentives, but it was all streaming, right? We heard about that deal. Well, for whatever reason, none of the deals ever materialized. Colorado gets antsy. They decide to leave for the Big 12. But once that happens, Amazon and NBC pull their offer from that first deal. That deal dies. So they're left with only the streaming offer. 4 hours before the Pac-12 presidents were going to meet on April, I think it was the 4th, they were scheduled to meet and vote on their grant of rights, approve it, and sign the deal. 4 hours before that meeting, Washington football coach Kalen DeBoer says, we can't do this. This won't work for us. So Washington and Oregon decide to go to the Big Ten. The rest is history. That's where we are. That was the timeline. Hey, now the Pac-4, all trying to figure out what to do. You've got Stanford Cal flirting with the ACC. Stanford trying really hard to get into the Big Ten still. You've got Oregon State and Washington State have hired Oliver Luck to help them out. And by the way, for those of you who might have just got here, Oliver Luck is not a consultant for Stanford and Cal, not all four elite teams. According to the LA Times article, it's only Washington State. And according to a source within West Virginia media who apparently talked to Oliver Luck directly, he is working with Washington State and Oregon State, but not Stanford and Cal. I think Stanford and Cal are trying to do their own thing. It almost looks like Stanford and Cal are trying to leave Washington State and Oregon State behind to a degree. I hope that doesn't happen because, like I said earlier, I think Stanford's the linchpin in this whole thing.